It's been 141 days since March 11th, when the NBA decided to shut down, and July 30th, when the first games in Orlando kicked off. It's been a very long time. We've had a lot of question marks, right? Is the bubble going to work? What's the style of play going to look like? Are teams going to be able to, make the playoffs? Teams like the Pelicans, teams like the Trailblazers, can they make it in, get a fair shot, and make to the playoffs? And I'll be honest, watching this weekend of basketball, watch a lot of basketball. With the first weekend of games in the books, I still feel, and I've advocated this before I should say in weeks prior, before the bubble kicked off, and before we saw this first weekend of games, I advocated before the plan was made for the NBA to go to 16 teams, just bring 8 in the West, 8 in the East, and let's just get the playoffs started. I thought it was a bad idea to bring 22 teams to the bubble, more so because it's just more heads to worry about. It's more teams and players. And obviously, the greater number of players, the greater number of teams you have in Orlando, the greater risk of the coronavirus infiltrating the bubble, the greater risk of maybe a player not following all the protocols and all the rules and maybe being a little lax, and that allowing the virus to infiltrate the bubble and spread. So, mostly for health reasons, I've advocated for 16 teams to go to the bubble. NBA said, we're going to do 22. And watching this opening weekend, while it worked great, and from a health standpoint, 2 weeks in a row, the NBA has had 0 positive tests inside the bubble. So for the most part, not out of the woods, still a long way to go. So far, with the most amount of players and teams that are going to be in the bubble in Orlando, it's worked. But I'll be honest, watching the actual play on the court, watching the actual games and trying to get into it, I still believe the NBA was better off going to 16 teams and going straight to the playoffs. Because, to be honest, watching these games over the weekend, these teams are treating these seeding games, quote unquote, that are supposed to be an extension of the regular season, that in some cases, for some teams outside of the playoff race, like the Wizards, like the Pelicans, like the Trailblazers, these were almost playoff games to try to, fight for your playoff lives, to try to get in and try to make a run. But a lot of these teams, a lot of these players are treating these seeding games as exhibitions. So I think the NBA would have been a lot better off going right to the playoffs, starting with playoff intensity basketball, and starting with games that actually matter. Because I'll be honest, watching these games over the weekend, they were great. Don't get me wrong. I was floored and I was shocked by how good of play it actually was. The offense was incredible. The shooting was something I could not believe. You have teams scoring 85 points in the first half. You never see that in the regular season. So coming off a 4-month layoff, I expected a lot of ugly play, a lot of bad shots, and a lot of low-scoring games. And instead, it's been the complete opposite. But I will say there's a few things that I took away that still made it hard for me personally to get into these games, to get fired up about a result, and to actually, look at these games like they actually mean something. Because one, the intensity is a lot less. Right? If some of these matchups we just had last night, I was watching a lot of the Bucks-Rockets game, a great game. We had Clippers-Lakers to start off on Thursday night. We've had some great matchups that normally we don't see too often. But in most of these games so far, the intensity is a lot less. A lot of these teams are still treating these seeding games like they're exhibitions, like they don't really count. And to a point, they're right. I mean, think about it. Without home court advantage, without, if you take away, maybe having a majority of the virtual fans in the stands and having your home PA announcer basically chant your name every time you get a basket, for the most part, there's no home court advantage. And even still, that only goes so far. There's really no home court advantage. So in theory, seeding is almost irrelevant. Right? If you're the Lakers, if you're the Clippers, if you're the Bucks, if you're the Raptors, when you're the top of the top, doesn't matter if you're the 1 seed, the 2 seed, you're not going on the road. You have to worry about going to a hostile environment. You have to worry about long travel. It's the same. It's all the same. Half the time, you can't even tell who's the home team or not. So these games are really supposed to be, these seeding games are all meant for the teams at the bottom to either improve their seeding, so a team like the Rockets, who are currently the 6th seed, to work their way up to get to the 5 or maybe even the 4. Team like the Magic, who came as the 8th seed, to work their way up to avoid the Bucks in the first round. Sure, these games matter for them, and seeding matters because the higher up you go, in theory, the lesser opponent you have to play. All right, I think we all can agree in the East, the 7 and 8 seed's a big difference. You avoid the Bucks. I mean, your chances are still minimal, but it's better. But for the most part, a lot of these teams aren't taking the game seriously, so the intensity is a lot less. And not to mention, speaking of teams not taking this seriously, let's look at the Pelicans. That is the perfect example because to me and a lot of people around the NBA, reporters, fans, thought that this 22-team restart was geared the most and tried to help the team the most was the Pelicans. They really wanted Zion in the playoffs. They had to think of something creative to help get him into the playoffs. And that idea was let's bring 13 teams from the West, play 8 games, and the team that's 4 games or less closest to the 8th seed will play in a play-in. It was geared towards trying to get Zion in the playoffs, trying to get eyeballs on these seeding games. But guess what? The Pelicans, the one team that this was designed the most to help, the one team the NBA really needs to get into the playoffs, or at least be close, at least get into the playoff series, play-in round, aren't even taking this seriously. The Pelicans are treating this like it's an exhibition, like it's regular season games in November. Because let me discuss and let me tell you if you missed it, the one man everyone wants to see, Zion Williamson. Let me tell you what his minutes were in these 2 games that the Pelicans played over the weekend. They played Saturday. The second game that they played, the Pelicans did this weekend. They started Thursday and then they played Saturday. They played the Clippers on Saturday. Zion played 14 minutes. Now, that's also in part because the Clippers dominated from the start. It was a blowout almost the entire, they're up by 40 in the second half. You're not going to play Zion when it doesn't matter. Fine. Let's go to Thursday. Thursday, they started for the Jazz. And again, the Pelicans are a team that needs to jump the Trailblazers and they need to be within 4 games of the Grizzlies to get a play-in series just to have a chance to get to the 8th seed to get to the playoffs. So they need to win a lot of these games. They really can't afford to take any games off. You know how many minutes Zion played on Thursday? 15. 15. And within that 15, it wasn't even parsed out where, okay, he'll start the game, we'll sit him for a long stretch, but then we'll make sure if it's a close game, in crunch time, 5 minutes, 4 minutes to go, he's going to get in. No. They basically did exactly what they did when they started easing him in when he came back in January. And that was he's going to start the quarter, he's going to play 4 or 5 minutes, then he's going to come out. Zion exited the game on Thursday, a must-win for the Pelicans, mind you. In the fourth quarter, with 7 minutes to go, the Pelicans up by 4. He did not re-enter the game. The Pelicans lost by 2. You need these games. You need to win these games to give yourself a shot. And the Pelicans don't even care. They're not even taking it seriously. The one team that Adam Silver and the NBA desperately wants to get to the playoffs. You can make the argument they made this entire 22-team format specifically for the Pelicans, help them get them in. They're not even taking it seriously. They don't even care. And honestly, I'm not even mad at the Pelicans. For them, it was never about this year. Whatever they could do is gravy for them this year. Zion is healthy, and that's the most important thing. He left the bubble, He's gone for 13 days. So David Griffin, the general manager of the Pelicans, their main focus was getting Zion back and getting him back in shape. They don't want him basically going from not working out, not practicing for 2 weeks, then go right in and play 40 minutes. It makes sense. And again, this is your prized possession. This is the face of your franchise. You're not going to risk his health or push it in a restart in Orlando. But my issue with the NBA is you got to see this coming. My issue with the NBA is you can't put all these teams, have all these games, and then not even have the one team you wanted to take seriously. So now the Pelicans are 4 games behind Memphis. But the issue is for them, they have 3 teams ahead of them. They have to jump the Trailblazers, the Spurs, and the Kings if they want a shot, even just trying to get a play-in. So if the one team that you wanted to take the most seriously isn't taking it seriously, what's the point? What's the point of 22 teams? And the third point, which to me kind of hammers home the NBA missing the boat, or I guess swinging and missing with bringing 22 teams in, is that, I don't know about yourself, I watched a lot of hockey over the weekend as well. Hockey, starting right with the playoffs, they brought 24 teams back. So they expanded their playoffs as well, but what they did is they started right with the playoffs. There's no seeding games. There's no play-in tournament, or I should say this is a play-in, technically play-in tournament, but there's no regular season extension to get players ready. This is boom, right in the playoffs. And you know what? It was awesome. Even without the fans, the intensity was high right away. The style of play was sloppy, sure. But when you have games that mean something right away, that are intense, that you have the players buying into, I think it makes the viewing experience so much better. So for the NBA, when I'm watching these exciting games, when I'm watching Bucks Rockets go down to the wire, you had early in the day, you had the Blazers and Celtics go down to the wire. You've had a lot of great games this weekend go down to the wire, be high scoring, and be intense. But honestly, personally for me, I had a tough time getting into it because in the end, in the back of my head, they don't mean anything. That's my biggest issue. Hockey with the playoffs, they mean something right away. Boom, you start, you got to win these games right out of the gate because guess what? If you lose, you're out. That's it. There's no warm-up. There's no extension of the regular season. You're in or you're out. And I thought the NBA should have done the same thing. And to me, watching these games, watching hockey over the weekend, watching basketball over the weekend, and hammered home, to me, the hockey did it right. NBA with these seeding games, to me, just aren't exciting. I can't get into it. I can't watch the Bucks game last night, or I can't even watch the the Lakers, the Raptors on Saturday. A great game. The Raptors played great defense, and the Raptors won by 15. Do I look at the Lakers any differently before that game and after that game? I don't. I take these results and outcomes with a grain of salt. And to me, that hurts the viewing experience of the games. That makes it not appointment television for me. When you have baseball, games mean something, especially in a sprint and a shortened season. Hockey's starting right with the playoffs where every game, boom, right away, you're starting quick. It makes it, to me, harder to get into exhibition games at best. Regular season games that a lot of these teams treat like exhibition games. The Lakers obviously know they're ramping up to the regular season, the playoffs. The Clippers, this is a test run to get geared up for the playoffs. Same thing with the Bucks. So when teams are treating it like exhibition games, I'm going to treat it like exhibition games as well. I'm not going to get into it. I will watch, but I'm not going to get fired up. I'm not going to overreact. And I'm honestly not going to be, too into it. Because I don't think you could take much of the results, much of the play for seriously. So I'm curious your thoughts, because that's just me. This is me as a sports fan who's watching these NBA games, and because of the lack of intensity, because the Pelicans, the one team who should be taking it seriously, isn't taking it seriously, I'm not taking these seeding games seriously. I'm not honestly too into them. I'm excited. I'm ready for the playoffs. I'm ready to get to the playoffs now. I'm not ready for another 2 weeks worth of seeding games to see who will get where. Because to me, it's for the most part irrelevant. But I'm curious your thoughts. If you're a basketball fan, if you watch basketball this weekend, if you're a casual sports fan, but hey, there's a lot of sports on, I watch basketball, I'm curious, were you into it? Do you like these seeding games? Or honestly, do you not pay attention to the playoffs until they start? Because again, the NBA is the one sport that has the least amount of parity. So in theory, the NBA is the one sport you can get away with not watching until the playoffs. And nothing will be too different. To me, the NBA should have went right to the playoffs. The intensity would have been there. I think the intrigue would have been there more than it is right now. So that's my thoughts. I think the NBA definitely should have went right to the playoffs.